The wedding was a fairy tale, spun from gold and diamonds, a storybook romance culminating at the altar. Evelyn Rowe, radiant and pregnant, believed she had found her forever with billionaire titan Nathaniel Blackwood. But fairy tales can burn. Before the ink on their marriage license was dry, she discovered her new husband in the arms of another woman in their own wedding suite. The mistress's victorious smirk was the last thing Evelyn saw before her world shattered. The next morning, Nathaniel Blackwood, the man who had just vowed his eternal love, was gone. Vanished without a trace, leaving behind a pregnant bride, a scornful family, and a mystery that would unravel a conspiracy far darker than a simple act of infidelity. The late August air over the sprawling Greenwich, Connecticut estate was thick with the scent of white roses and old money. Evelyn Rowe felt like she was floating a dream given form in ivory silk and chantilly lace. The dress, a custom creation by a designer whose name was spoken in hushed, reverent tones, clung to her body, delicately accentuating the gentle swell of her stomach, a secret promise she and Nathaniel shared. At 4 months pregnant, she was filled with a profound, almost dizzying joy. From her vantage point on the marble terrace of Blackwood Manor, she watched the last of the sunlight bleed across the sky, painting the manicured lawns in hues of orange and violet. Guests. A constellation of the East Coast's most powerful figures mingled below their laughter like the clinking of fine crystal. This was Nathaniel's world, a world of dynastic wealth, of whispered stock tips and political favors exchanged over champagne. It was a world she was now a part of. It's breathtaking, isn't it? Evelyn turned, a smile blooming on her face. Nathaniel Blackwood stood behind her, impossibly handsome in his bespoke tuxedo. His dark hair was impeccably styled, and his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held an intensity that still made her heart skip. He slid his arms around her waist, his large, warm hands coming to rest protectively over their unborn child. "It's perfect," she whispered, leaning back against his chest. "You're perfect." "We are," he corrected gently, his lips brushing her temple. "Everything I do, Evelyn, is for you, for this family." She believed him. How could she not? Nathaniel had pursued her with a single-minded determination that had swept her off her feet. She was an art historian, content with her world of dusty archives and quiet galleries. He was the CEO of Blackwood Industries, a global conglomerate whose name was synonymous with power. They were an unlikely pair, and she knew many, including Nathaniel's own mother, saw her as little more than a gold-digging interloper. A flicker of movement caught her eye. Genevieve Blackwood, the family's formidable matriarch, was watching them from across the terrace. Her expression was as unreadable and cold as the diamond choker at her throat. Genevieve had made her disapproval of Evelyn plain from the start, her polite inquiries always feeling like interrogations, her compliments laced with subtle barbs. She saw Evelyn not as a daughter-in-law, but as a weakness in the fortress of the Blackwood dynasty. Nathaniel seemed to sense her unease. "Ignore her," he murmured into her ear. "Tonight is about us. Nothing and no one else matters." He led her to the dance floor for their first dance. As the orchestra swelled into a hauntingly beautiful melody, the world melted away. It was just the two of them swaying in the center of their own universe. He looked down at her, his gaze so full of adoration that it chased away the last of her doubts. This was real. This love was real. The reception was a blur of well-wishes, toasts, and endless smiles until her cheeks ached. Her best friend, Jenna Hayes, A fiery redhead with a no-nonsense attitude squeezed her hand. "You look stunning, Ev. But seriously, that old dragon Genevieve has been staring daggers at you all night. If she tries anything, I've got a glass of Cabernet with her name on it." Evelyn laughed, a genuine happy sound. "It's fine. She'll come around. If she doesn't, we'll short sell her favorite charity," Jenna quipped, making Evelyn laugh again. As the night wore on, a sense of fatigue began to settle deep into her bones. The baby was making its presence known. Excusing herself, she decided to head up to their bridal suite to rest for a few minutes before the final send-off. She wanted to slip into the comfortable silk robe waiting for her and kick off the beautiful but punishing heels. The grand staircase of the manor was quiet, the sounds of the party below muffled by thick oak doors. She walked down the long carpeted hallway, her heart light. The suite was at the end of the west wing, a private sanctuary Nathaniel had personally overseen the decoration of. She pushed open the heavy door, a soft smile on her lips, ready to call down to her new husband. "Nathaniel, I just need a—" The words died in her throat. The room was dimly lit, save for the moonlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. But it was enough. It was more than enough to see the scene laid out before her. A woman with platinum blonde hair, her back to the door, was pressed against the wall. Nathaniel stood before her, his hands tangled in her hair, his tuxedo jacket discarded on the floor. Their mouths were locked in a feverish, desperate kiss that spoke of a deep and searing familiarity. It was not a stranger's kiss. It was not a mistake. For a moment, Evelyn's brain refused to process what her eyes were seeing. It was a trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But then the woman pulled back slightly, turning her head. Evelyn's blood ran cold. It was Victoria Vance, the ambitious, notoriously ruthless COO of a rival tech firm, Vanguard Corp. Evelyn had met her once at a charity gala. She remembered Victoria's predatory smile and the way her eyes had lingered on Nathaniel a moment too long. The sound that escaped Evelyn's lips was a small, wounded thing, barely a gasp. But it was enough. Nathaniel's head whipped around. His eyes widened in horror, the color draining from his face. He looked like a man who had been struck by lightning. He shoved Victoria away from him so forcefully she stumbled. "Evelyn," he breathed, his voice raw. It's not what it looks like." The cliché was so absurd, so insulting, that it broke through her shock, replaced by a wave of white-hot fury. Victoria Vance, however, simply smoothed down her shimmering silver dress. She turned fully, and unlike the panic on Nathaniel's face, hers was a mask of cool, triumphant amusement. A slow, venomous smirk spread across her perfectly painted red lips. She looked Evelyn up and down, her gaze lingering for a heart-stopping second on Evelyn's barely there baby bump. "Well," Victoria purred, her voice dripping with condescension. "The blushing bride. It seems the party's over." The smirk. That was the thing that shattered Evelyn's world into a million irreparable pieces. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a victory lap. Evelyn looked from Victoria's gloating face to her husband's, the face of the man who just hours ago had promised to cherish and protect her for all of his days. The man who was the father of her child. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. A chilling, terrifying calm washed over her. She took one last look at the scene, the man she loved, the woman who had ruined her, the opulent room that was meant to be their haven, now a gilded cage of lies, and she turned and walked away, the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears like a death knell. Evelyn didn't remember walking back down the hallway. Her feet moved on their own, carrying her away from the wreckage of her life. She found an unused sitting room, the air cold and stale, and sank into a velvet armchair, her body trembling uncontrollably. The silk of her wedding dress felt like a shroud. Each joyful memory from the day was now tainted, replaying in her mind as a cruel joke. Nathaniel's loving words, his tender kisses, the vows they had exchanged before God, and 300 witnesses, all of it was a lie. She sat there for what could have been minutes or an hour, wrapped in a cocoon of silent agony. The distant music of the party was a form of torture. Finally, the door creaked open. It was Jenna, her face etched with concern. "Ev, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." The dam broke. Evelyn's story came out in a torrent of choked sobs and fractured sentences. "Nathaniel, with Victoria Vance, in our room, She couldn't finish. She didn't have to. Jenna's face transformed from concern to pure, unadulterated rage. "That son of a bitch! I'll kill him! Where is he?" She made to stand, but Evelyn grabbed her arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "No, I want to go home." Home. The word felt foreign. The apartment she'd kept, the one Nathaniel had wanted her to sell, was the only place she could think of. Not this cold, monstrous house. Jenna, ever the protector, swung into action. She navigated them out a side entrance, avoiding the lingering guests and the prying eyes of the staff. She drove Evelyn through the sleeping Connecticut suburbs back to the city, the silence in the car thick with unspoken pain. Evelyn spent the night curled on her own sofa, still in her wedding dress, refusing to take it off. To remove it would be to accept that it was over, and some part of her was still desperately clinging to the hope that this was all a terrible nightmare. The morning light felt like an assault. Her phone had been buzzing incessantly since she'd fled the manor. Dozens of missed calls and texts from Nathaniel. "Evelyn, please. We need to talk." "It was a mistake. Let me explain. I love you." Each message was a fresh stab to her heart. She ignored them all. Around 10 a.m., a sleek black town car pulled up outside her building. The person who emerged was not Nathaniel, but Victoria Vance. Dressed in a sharp, cream-colored pantsuit, she looked as if she'd just stepped out of a boardroom, not another man's bed. "Jenna, don't let her in," Evelyn said, her voice hoarse. But Jenna was already at the door, blocking the entrance. "Get the hell away from here, you home-wrecking parasite!" Victoria simply arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I'm not here to talk to the help. I'm here to see Evelyn." Her eyes flickered past Jenna, landing on Evelyn. "Don't you want to know why your brand-new husband spent his wedding night with me instead of his pregnant little bride?" The calculated cruelty of her words was breathtaking. Evelyn felt a surge of adrenaline. She stood up and walked to the door, her movements stiff. "What do you want, Victoria?" "I just wanted to deliver a message," Victoria said, her smirk back in place. "Nathaniel made his choice. This pathetic little fairy tale of yours is over. He'll be in touch through his lawyers about the arrangements." She glanced pointedly at Evelyn's stomach again. "Don't worry. The Blackwoods always pay to clean up their messes." Before Evelyn or Jenna could respond, Victoria turned on her heel and glided back to her car, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and poison in her wake. For the next few hours, Evelyn expected the call from Nathaniel's lawyer. She expected divorce papers. She expected the end. What she didn't expect was the call she received just after 3 p.m. It was from Genevieve Blackwood. "Evelyn," her mother-in-law's voice was clipped, devoid of any warmth. "Where is my son?" "I imagine he's with his mistress," Evelyn replied, the bitterness sharp on her tongue. There was a pause. "Don't be deliberately obtuse. He is not with Miss Vance. Her office confirmed she's been in meetings all day. His security detail hasn't seen him since last night. His phone is going straight to voicemail. He missed a 9 a.m. board meeting. Nathaniel has never in his entire life missed a board meeting. So I will ask you again, where is he? A cold dread began to seep into Evelyn's bones, pushing past the anger and heartache. I haven't spoken to him. I haven't seen him since last night. He was last seen on the estate grounds around 2 a.m., arguing with someone on his phone, Genevieve stated. His car is still in the garage. His wallet and passport are in the suite. He has vanished. The world tilted on its axis. Victoria's smug visit this morning. She had acted as if she had won, as if Nathaniel was with her. But he wasn't. By evening, the situation had escalated. The Greenwich police were involved, though they treated it with a gentle touch reserved for the obscenely wealthy. The official line was that a high-powered man, likely under immense stress from his wedding and a looming business merger, had simply taken off to clear his head. They were polite, but dismissive. He'll turn up in a few days in the Hamptons with a headache, Mrs. Blackwood, one of the detectives had said to her with a condescending pat on the arm. Evelyn was forced to return to the manor to give a statement. The house, which had been a symbol of her dreams just 24 hours earlier, now felt like a mausoleum. The scent of roses was cloying funereal. Genevieve treated her with icy suspicion, her eyes scanning Evelyn as if searching for clues to her son's disappearance. The implication was clear. The distraught, scorned new bride was the most likely suspect. You had a fight, Genevieve stated, her voice like chipping ice. What did you say to him? Did you threaten him? He was cheating on me, Genevieve, on our wedding night. Evelyn's voice cracked. I walked away. That was it. Victoria Vance was also questioned. She played the part of the concerned business associate, beautifully admitting that she and Nathaniel had a complicated history, but denying any knowledge of his whereabouts. She expressed her deepest sympathies for the poor, distraught bride. The police bought it hook, line, and sinker. Days turned into a week. The media got wind of the story, and it exploded. Billionaire Groom Vanishes after lavish wedding. Photos of her and Nathaniel smiling and in love were splashed across every news site, juxtaposed with grainy paparazzi shots of a stone-faced Victoria. The narrative they spun was a sordid tale of a love triangle gone wrong. Evelyn became the tragic, pregnant wife, Victoria the glamorous other woman, and Nathaniel was the man who had simply walked away from it all. But Evelyn knew with a certainty that settled deep in her soul that it wasn't true. Nathaniel wouldn't just leave. He was meticulous, a control freak. He wouldn't abandon his company, his family, his child, not without a word. The police closed the active investigation after 2 weeks, classifying him as a voluntary missing person. The world moved on, but Evelyn couldn't. She was left alone in the vast, silent manor, a prisoner in her gilded cage, with the ghost of her husband, the scorn of his family, and a baby growing inside her that might never know its father. The last image seared into her mind was Victoria's triumphant smirk, a smirk that said she knew more than she was telling. And Evelyn realized that if she was ever going to find out what happened to Nathaniel, she would have to do it herself. A month crawled by, each day longer and emptier than the last. The media frenzy subsided, replaced by the relentless humming silence of Blackwood Manor. Genevieve had insisted Evelyn remain at the estate, a decision that felt less like concern and more like house arrest. For the sake of appearances, she'd said, and for the security of my grandchild. The staff moved around her like specters, their polite greetings laced with pity and suspicion. Evelyn was the woman whose husband had abandoned her on their wedding night. She was a tragic figure, a scandal. Her pregnancy was more pronounced now, a constant physical reminder of the life she and Nathaniel had planned together. Some days the grief was a leaden weight pinning her to the bed. On other days, a slow burning anger propelled her forward. She refused to be the victim in this story. She refused to let her child be born into a world where their father was a coward who ran away. She knew in her heart there was more to the story. Nathaniel, for all his faults, was a creature of habit and control. His study, a sanctuary of mahogany and worn leather, had become Evelyn's focus. The police had given it a cursory search, but she knew they wouldn't have known what to look for. She, on the other hand, had spent countless hours in this room while he worked learning the rhythm of his life. The room was exactly as he'd left it. A stack of files on his desk, a Mont Blanc pen lying beside an open ledger. But something was off. A specific file 1 he had been working on obsessively for weeks before the wedding was missing. It was a thick, dark blue binder labeled Project Nightingale. She had asked him about it once, and he'd been uncharacteristically evasive, just saying it was a revolutionary energy project that would change the future of the company. Now, it was gone. She also noticed faint scratch marks near the base of the enormous built-in bookshelf, as if someone had tried to pry something open. She ran her fingers over the wood, feeling the small imperfections. It was a dead end for now, but she filed the detail away. Her relationship with Genevieve remained fraught with tension. The older woman kept her at a distance, her conversations limited to inquiries about Evelyn's health and the babies. Yet Evelyn occasionally saw cracks in her icy facade. She would find Genevieve standing in the doorway of the study late at night, a lost look on her face, or notice her staring at a photograph of Nathaniel with an expression of profound sorrow. Genevieve was grieving too, but her pride and suspicion were a fortress she refused to abandon. Jenna was her lifeline. She visited every other day, smuggling in real-world food to counteract the bland, health-conscious meals the Manor's chef prepared. "You need to get out of this place, Ev," Jenna said one afternoon, watching as Evelyn listlessly pushed a piece of steamed asparagus around her plate. "It's a 5-star prison. Let's get the police to reopen the case." "They won't," Evelyn said, her voice flat. "As far as they're concerned, a rich guy got cold feet and flew to a private island. They don't care. No body, no crime." "So what's your plan? Just wait here until little Blackwood Jr. arrives?" "No," Evelyn said, a new resolve hardening her voice. "I'm going to find my own answers. I can't trust the police, and I certainly can't trust the Blackwoods. I'm going to hire someone." Jenna's eyes lit up. "A private investigator, yes, like in the movies. Someone grizzled and cynical who drinks whiskey for breakfast." The man Evelyn found wasn't quite that dramatic, but he was close. His name was Arthur Harding. He was a former NYPD detective in his late 50s, with a rumpled suit, tired eyes that missed nothing, and a reputation for being relentless. He worked out of a small, cluttered office in Queens that smelled of stale coffee and paper. Evelyn, using a portion of the generous allowance Nathaniel had settled on her before the wedding, met him there. She felt a pang of guilt using his money to investigate him, but she pushed it aside. Harding listened to her story without interruption, his face impassive. He took notes in a small, spiral-bound notebook. She told him everything: the wedding, the betrayal with Victoria Vance, the vanishing, the missing Project Nightingale file, the scratch marks on the bookshelf. When she finished, he leaned back in his squeaky chair and studied her for a long moment. "Mrs. Blackwood," he began, his voice a low gravel. 99 times out of 100 a story like this ends one of 2 ways. 1, your husband is sipping a mojito on a beach in Belize with the blonde. 2, he's at the bottom of the Hudson in a pair of cement shoes, because of gambling debts, or a deal gone bad. The "I need to clear my head" story is usually a cover for one of the other two. "I know my husband," Evelyn insisted. "He wouldn't just run, and if he was in that kind of trouble, he would have told me. Something was wrong in the weeks leading up to the wedding. He was distracted, stressed enough to cheat on his pregnant bride on his wedding night." Harding asked his question blunt, but not unkind. Evelyn flinched. "I don't have an answer for that, but the way he looked when I saw them, it wasn't just guilt. It was fear. And Victoria, she wasn't just gloating, she was performing, as if she needed me to see it." Harding's pen stilled. He looked at her with a newfound interest. "Performing, what do you mean?" "It felt staged." Evelyn said, the idea taking shape even as she spoke it. Her smirk, her lines. It was all too perfect, too cruel. Like she was deliberately trying to push me away to sever any ties I had to Nathaniel in the most brutal way possible. Harding steepled his fingers, his gaze thoughtful. "You think the affair was a setup?" "I don't know what to think," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I know he's gone, and she's the only one who seemed happy about it. Start with her, Victoria Vance. Dig into every corner of her life, her connection to Nathaniel, her company Vanguard Corp. Find out what she's hiding. This won't be cheap, Mrs. Blackwood. Digging into people like Vance and companies like Vanguard, that's kicking a hornet's nest." "I don't care about the cost," Evelyn said, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. "I need the truth." Harding nodded slowly. "All right, I'll take the case. I'll start with Vance. But you need to be careful. If there is something more going on here, this manor might not be the safest place for you." Evelyn left Harding's office feeling a flicker of something she hadn't felt in weeks' hope. She had an ally. The whispers in the walls of Blackwood Manor were no longer just echoes of her own grief and fear. They were clues. And for the first time since her world had fallen apart, she felt ready to start listening to them. She was no longer just the abandoned wife. She was a woman on a mission. 2 weeks after hiring Arthur Harding, Evelyn received a call on a burner phone he had provided her. "Meet me at the diner in Koskob, the one off the post road. Come alone." The clandestine nature of the meeting sent a shiver of nervous energy through her. She gave the manor's driver a vague story about meeting a friend for lunch and had him drop her a few blocks away from the location. The diner was a classic slice of Americana with red vinyl booths and the smell of frying bacon hanging in the air. Harding was in a corner booth, a half-empty cup of coffee in front of him. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. As soon as she sat down, he slid a manila folder across the table. "You were right," he said, his voice low. "Victoria Vance is more than just a corporate rival with a grudge." Evelyn opened the folder. Inside were pages of typed notes and several grainy surveillance photos. The first few detailed Victoria's background. She hadn't climbed the corporate ladder. She had blasted her way up it, leaving a trail of ruined careers and hostile takeovers in her wake. She was the right hand of Donovan Croft, the notoriously ruthless CEO of Vanguard Corp. Croft was a corporate shark of the highest order, a man who believed in winning at any cost. Vanguard and Blackwood Industries have been rivals for years, Harding explained. But in the last 6 months it got personal. They were both bidding on a massive government contract for renewable energy. The Project Nightingale you mentioned, it involves a new battery technology Nathaniel's R&D department developed. It's a game changer. Whoever gets that tech controls the energy market for the next 50 years. Evelyn's blood ran cold. This was what Nathaniel had been working on so obsessively. "It gets better," Harding continued, tapping a photograph. It showed Victoria Vance meeting a man in a parking garage. The man was burly with a shaved head and a grim expression. "This is a man named Gregor, ex-Special Forces, now a freelance corporate security consultant. That's a nice way of saying he makes problems disappear for people like Donovan Croft. He specializes in intimidation, blackmail, and abduction." Evelyn stared at the photo, her heart pounding. "My sources say that Blackwood Industries was the front-runner for the contract," Harding said. "Nathaniel had the superior tech and was about to close the deal. 2 days after he disappeared, Vanguard Corp suddenly submitted a revised proposal with technical data that was shockingly similar to Blackwood's. The contract is now on hold, pending an investigation into possible industrial espionage." The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture that was more terrifying than she could have imagined. "So you think Vanguard or Donovan Croft had Nathaniel abducted to steal his research?" "It's the working theory," Harding confirmed. "Which brings us back to the wedding night. Why the public drama with Victoria? Why not just snatch him quietly, to discredit him?" Evelyn whispered, the realization dawning on her. If he vanished after being caught in a sordid affair, everyone would assume he fled from shame. No one would suspect a corporate kidnapping. It creates a smokescreen. And Victoria, she was the instrument. "Exactly." Harding nodded, looking at her with a new respect. "It also destabilizes his company. With Nathaniel gone and presumed to be a philandering deserter, the board is in chaos. The stock has taken a hit. It makes Blackwood Industries vulnerable. Vanguard could even be positioning for a hostile takeover." Evelyn felt sick. The betrayal, the public humiliation she had suffered. It wasn't personal. It was a calculated business strategy. She was a pawn in a multi-billion-dollar corporate war. The thought was somehow both a relief and a profound violation. The man she loved hadn't callously thrown her away. He had been targeted, and she had been used as collateral damage. The argument he was having on the phone the night he disappeared. Harding said, "I got a partial trace on the number. It was a burner, but it pinged off a tower near Vanguard's headquarters. He was likely talking to one of them. Maybe Croft, maybe Gregor." "What about the cheating itself?" Evelyn asked the question, tasting like ash. "Was that real? Was he in on it?" The doubt was a sliver of ice in her heart. Harding sighed, his gaze softening slightly. "That's the part I can't figure out. Was he a willing participant in a long-term affair with Vance, and she simply used the opportunity to set him up? Or was he coerced that night, blackmailed into it? Gregor's presence suggests they play dirty. A threat against you, perhaps, against the baby." The idea hit Evelyn with the force of a physical blow. The possibility that Nathaniel had been forced into that embrace, that the look of horror on his face was not just guilt, but genuine fear for her. It reframed the entire memory. It didn't erase the pain, but it changed its shape. "So what do we do?" Evelyn asked, her voice shaking but firm. "We can't go to the police with this. They'll dismiss it as corporate conspiracy theories." "We can't," Harding agreed. "Croft is too powerful, too well-connected. He'd bury us in litigation and bury the evidence even deeper. We need proof, something concrete that ties him and Vanguard to Nathaniel's disappearance." "The study," Evelyn said immediately. "The missing file, the scratch marks. There has to be something else in that room, something Nathaniel hid." "It's a huge risk going back there and searching now," Harding warned. "Genevieve is watching you. If she thinks you're up to something—" "I don't have a choice," Evelyn stated, her resolve hardening into steel. "Nathaniel's mother may hate me, but she loves her son. If I can find proof, real proof, she might be the only person powerful enough to help me fight Donovan Croft." She left the diner with a clear, albeit terrifying, purpose. The game was no longer about a cheating husband. It was about a missing man, a stolen legacy, and a ruthless enemy who had underestimated the woman he'd left behind. Evelyn Blackwood was done being a pawn. It was time to start playing the game herself. Returning to the manor felt different. The oppressive silence no longer felt like grief. It felt like the quiet before a storm. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, every creak of the floorboards a potential threat. Harding's warnings echoed in her mind. She was in a house full of people loyal to the Blackwood name, but she had no idea who, if anyone, she could trust. Her first obstacle was Genevieve. Evelyn knew a direct confrontation would be disastrous. She needed to approach the matriarch carefully, not with wild accusations, but with undeniable facts. She needed the proof that was likely hidden somewhere in Nathaniel's study. For 2 days, she watched the household's rhythm. Genevieve spent her mornings in the East Wing Conservatory and her afternoons taking calls in her private office. The study was typically unoccupied during this time. It was her only window. On the 3rd day, she put her plan into motion. Feigning a pregnancy-related headache, she retired to her room after breakfast, asking the staff not to disturb her. Once she was sure she was alone, she slipped out and made her way to the West Wing. The study was just as she remembered a shrine to a man who was now a ghost. Her heart ached as she ran a hand over his leather chair. Forcing the emotion down, she went straight to the massive bookshelf where she'd seen the scratch marks. She examined the area again more closely this time. The marks were near the baseboard, hidden behind a decorative scrollwork panel. It looked seamless, but when she pushed on it, there was a slight give. Her breath hitched. Using her fingernails, she carefully pried at the edge. The panel popped open with a soft click, revealing not a keyhole, but a small digital keypad. A password. It could be anything. A birthday, an anniversary. She tried the date they met their wedding date. His birthday, her birthday. Nothing. After the 5th failed attempt, the keypad flashed red and went dark, a 10-minute lockout. Panic began to set in. She was about to give up when the door to the study swung open. Genevieve Blackwood stood there. Her arms crossed her face, a thunderous mask. "Looking for something, Evelyn." Evelyn froze, her blood turning to ice. She was caught. "Genevieve, I can explain." "Can you?" Genevieve stepped into the room, her eyes falling to the open panel and the keypad. "Snooping through my son's private things. Were you looking for a hidden will? A secret bank account? No." Evelyn stood up, her voice stronger than she expected. "I was looking for the truth. The truth about what happened to Nathaniel." Genevieve let out a short, bitter laugh. "The truth is, he humiliated you and this family and then ran off like a coward. The sooner you accept that, the better." "You don't believe that any more than I do." Evelyn shot back, her fear replaced by a surge of desperate courage. "You knew your son. He was a lot of things, but he was not a coward. He wouldn't abandon his company, and he wouldn't abandon his child." She saw a flicker of something in Genevieve's eyes, a crack in the marble facade. Evelyn seized the opening. She pulled the burner phone from her pocket, the one Harding had given her. "I hired an investigator, Genevieve." Her mother-in-law's eyes narrowed. "You did what?" "A good one," Evelyn pressed on. "And he's found things that point to Donovan Croft and Vanguard Corp. He believes Nathaniel was abducted as part of a plan to steal his Project Nightingale research and take over the company." She quickly laid out everything Harding had told her about the government contract, the suspiciously similar proposal from Vanguard, the ex-Special Forces thug on Croft's payroll. She didn't hold anything back. Genevieve listened, her expression unreadable. When Evelyn finished, the silence was heavy. "And the affair?" Genevieve asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Was that part of your investigator's theory as well? We think it was staged, Evelyn said, her own voice dropping. A smokescreen. A way to discredit him and create a cover story for his disappearance. They may have threatened him, Genevieve. Threatened me. Or the baby. She placed a hand on her stomach, and for the first time she saw raw, unfiltered emotion on her mother-in-law's face. It was fear. Fear for her son, and fear for her unborn grandchild. The fortress was crumbling. Donovan Croft, Genevieve whispered the name, tasting like poison. My husband Nathaniel's father always said Croft was a viper, that he would burn the world down to rule over the ashes. She walked over to the keypad and stared at it. If Nathaniel was in trouble, if he feared someone was coming for him, he would have left a contingency, a fail-safe. He was always 3 steps ahead. She looked at Evelyn, her eyes no longer filled with suspicion, but with a dawning, terrible understanding. You were not a weakness he succumbed to. You were the one thing he wanted to protect. The words hung in the air, a tacit apology and a declaration of a truce. A new fragile alliance was being forged in the crucible of their shared crisis. This keypad, Genevieve said, her voice now crisp and businesslike. It won't be a date. It would be something only family would know, something from his childhood. She paused, her mind clearly racing back through the years. Then her eyes lit up with a faint spark. Try 081495. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she typed in the code. What is it? The call number of the first library book he ever checked out on his own, Genevieve said softly. A book about building forts. He was so proud. As she pressed the final digit, there was a soft, whirring sound. The keypad glowed green, and a section of the bookshelf beside it clicked open, revealing a hidden compartment. A small steel safe was nestled inside. Evelyn and Genevieve looked at each other. They had crossed a threshold. They were no longer mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, locked in a silent war of disapproval. They were partners united by the man they both loved and standing before the first real clue that could bring him home, or failing that bring his enemies to justice. The safe was a formidable block of polished steel. It wasn't a combination lock, but a biometric scanner requiring a fingerprint. Genevieve's regal composure faltered for a moment. Of course, she murmured in frustration. Nathaniel's fingerprint. We're no further ahead. Evelyn's mind raced. Nathaniel was meticulous, but he was also sentimental. He planned for every contingency. If he'd set this up knowing he might be taken, he would have created a backup. Is there anyone else? Evelyn asked. Someone he trusted implicitly. Someone whose fingerprint might also be registered. Genevieve was about to say no when a new voice spoke from the doorway. Try me. They both turned. Oliver Blackwood, Nathaniel's younger brother, stood leaning against the doorframe. Oliver was the family's charming rogue, a stark contrast to his serious older brother. He spent more time on yachts and in Aspen than he did in the boardroom, and Genevieve often lamented his lack of ambition. Now his usual carefree expression was gone, replaced by a somber gravity. Oliver. What are you doing here? Genevieve demanded, flustered. I heard voices, saw the door was ajar, he said, walking into the room. His eyes took in the scene, the open panel, the exposed safe. Looks like the party's finally getting interesting. He looked at Evelyn, his gaze holding a surprising depth of sympathy. I never believed he just ran off. Nate's not built that way. His fingerprint won't work, Oliver, Genevieve said dismissively. This is serious. Maybe it will, Oliver replied, stepping forward. We set this up together years ago after a security scare. He was the primary, I was the secondary. A dead man's switch, he called it. Morbid, I know, but that was my brother. Without another word, Oliver placed his thumb on the scanner. It glowed blue whirred for a second, and then the safe unlocked with a heavy, satisfying thud. Evelyn's heart leaped into her throat. Oliver pulled the heavy door open. The contents were not what she expected. There were no stacks of cash or bearer bonds. Instead, there were two items, a slim, encrypted hard drive and a simple black burner phone. Oliver handed the hard drive to Evelyn. This is it, his insurance policy. They took the items to the large monitor on Nathaniel's desk. Oliver, who despite his playboy persona, was a tech prodigy, connected the drive. A password prompt immediately filled the screen. Here we go again, Genevieve sighed. Don't worry, I know this one too, Oliver said with a sad smile. It was the name of his dog when we were kids, the one he rescued from the shelter. He typed in the letters SHADOW. The screen flickered, and a single protected video file appeared. Oliver clicked play. Nathaniel's face filled the screen. He looked tired, stressed, and was sitting in this very study. The video was time-stamped just 3 days before the wedding. If you are watching this, he began, his voice strained, it means I'm gone, and things have gone terribly wrong. He looked directly into the camera, and Evelyn felt as if he were speaking directly to her. For the past 6 months, I've been under pressure from Donovan Croft and Vanguard Corp. He wanted my Project Nightingale technology. I refused to sell. So he tried other methods. Threats, blackmail. He uncovered a financial mistake my father made years ago, something that could tarnish the Blackwood name. He threatened to expose it. Genevieve gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I fought back. Nathaniel continued, his jaw tight with anger. And in doing so, I uncovered something much worse. Croft isn't just a corporate shark. He's a criminal. Vanguard has been using shell corporations to do business with sanctioned regimes funding conflicts to gain access to rare earth minerals needed for our kind of technology. Project Nightingale would have made his entire illegal supply chain obsolete and exposed him in the process. He wasn't just trying to steal my tech, he was trying to ensure his own survival. He paused, running a hand through his hair. He knows that I know. His threats have escalated. He mentioned you, Evelyn. He mentioned our baby. I realized he wouldn't just stop at me. He would come after my family. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face. Harding had been right. Which brings me to the wedding, Nathaniel said, his expression turning to one of deep pain. Victoria Vance has been on Croft's payroll for years. She was his weapon. They gave me an ultimatum: throw the deal, discredit myself, and push my family away, or they would harm Evelyn. They wanted to isolate me, to make me a pariah, so that when they took me, no one would look too closely. His voice broke. The scene on our wedding night, it was their design, a horrific piece of theater. I fought it, but they showed me. They showed me photographs of you, Evelyn, surveillance photos. They were watching you. I had no choice. I had to make you hate me. I had to make you leave. I thought it was the only way to protect you. It was the greatest mistake of my life. The video was his confession and his absolution. The betrayal that had shattered her world was in fact a desperate, clumsy act of love. All the evidence is on this drive, Nathaniel's voice concluded. The offshore accounts, the shipping manifests, my communication with Croft's intermediaries. Everything the authorities need to dismantle his empire. Get this to someone you trust. His eyes found the camera one last time. Evelyn, I love you. Protect our child. Find me. The screen went black. For a long moment the room was silent, save for Evelyn's quiet sobs. Genevieve put a comforting hand on her shoulder, the gesture feeling both strange and profoundly right. Oliver picked up the burner phone from the safe. He powered it on. There was a single unsent text message saved as a draft. It was dated the night of the wedding, just minutes before he vanished. It read, "They have me. Project Nightingale is the key. Trust no one. Protect our child." They finally had it. The truth. Nathaniel wasn't a runaway groom. He was a prisoner of war in a corporate conflict. The betrayal was a sacrifice, and the people responsible had names and faces. The grief in the room began to recede, replaced by something cold, hard, and resolute. Justice. The revelation from the hard drive transformed the atmosphere in Blackwood Manor from one of mourning to a clandestine war room. The lines of battle had been drawn. On one side stood Evelyn Genevieve, and Oliver, an unlikely triumvirate of a betrayed wife, a grieving mother, and an underestimated brother. On the other side was Donovan Croft, a man who commanded a shadowy empire, shielded by wealth and power. Genevieve, galvanized by the truth about her son, became the formidable matriarch Evelyn had only ever seen glimpses of. The icy disapproval was replaced by a steely, pragmatic fury. She worked her network, making quiet calls to powerful, trusted contacts in finance and politics, people whose loyalty was to the Blackwood family, not just the company. She spoke in hypotheticals and veiled warnings, planting seeds of doubt about Vanguard Corp., priming the ground for the storm to come. Oliver, shedding his carefree persona like a snake, sheds its skin, became their technology and strategy expert. He made multiple encrypted copies of the hard drive, storing them in secure locations. He worked with Harding to analyze the data, cross-referencing shipping logs with shell corporations, creating an unassailable chain of evidence that linked Donovan Croft directly to international crimes. He proved to be as brilliant and meticulous as his older brother, his laid-back nature a clever camouflage for a razor-sharp mind. Evelyn was the heart of the operation. She was the keeper of Nathaniel's memory, the moral compass that guided their mission. She pored over his notes on Project Nightingale, not just the technical data, but his personal annotations about his vision for the project to create clean, affordable energy to build a better world for his child. This wasn't just about revenge or rescuing Nathaniel anymore. It was about protecting his legacy. Harding became their field general. Working with the irrefutable proof from the drive, he quietly approached a contact he trusted at the Department of Justice, someone in the complex financial crimes unit who was known for being immune to political pressure. He presented the case not as a kidnapping, but as a matter of national security and massive financial fraud, ensuring it would be handled by the most serious investigators. The days were a blur of hushed meetings, encrypted emails, and strategic planning. Evelyn found a strength she never knew she possessed. The vulnerability of her pregnancy was now a source of power. She was fighting for her child's future, for their right to know their father as the hero. He was not the villain the world believed him to be. She and Genevieve, once adversaries, now shared meals, poring over documents, and offering each other a quiet, resolute support. They were bound by a shared love and a common enemy. They decided to strike. The plan had two phases. First, Oliver would anonymously leak a small, carefully selected portion of the financial data to a renowned investigative journalist known for taking down corporate titans. This would ignite the media firestorm and put public pressure on Vanguard Corp. Second, as Vanguard's stock plummeted and regulators began to swarm Harding's DOJ contact would unseal the indictments and execute federal warrants on Donovan Croft and his key associates, including Victoria Vance. The night before the leak, the three of them gathered in the study. The room was no longer a place of sorrow, but a command center. "Once we do this, there's no turning back," Genevieve said, her voice steady. "Croft will retaliate. He will try to harm us." "We'll be ready," Oliver stated, his eyes fixed on his laptop screen. He had already arranged for enhanced security for all of them. Evelyn walked to the window, looking out at the dark, sprawling grounds of the estate. She rested a hand on her stomach, feeling the strong, reassuring kick of her baby. She was no longer the naive, love-struck girl in the wedding dress. The fire of her ordeal hadn't consumed her. It had forged her into something stronger. The pain of Nathaniel's betrayal had been replaced by a profound understanding of his sacrifice. She had found the truth. She had cleared his name. Now it was time to bring him home. "Do it," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. With a final keystroke, Oliver sent the encrypted file. The first shot in their war had been fired. The outcome was uncertain. The path ahead was perilous. Donovan Croft was a wounded animal, and wounded animals are the most dangerous. They still didn't know where Nathaniel was or if he was even alive. But looking at the determined faces of Genevieve and Oliver, feeling the life moving inside her, Evelyn knew they would not fail. Her fairy tale had ended on her wedding night, but a new story was just beginning. It was not a story of a princess in a gilded cage, but of a queen on a battlefield, fighting for her family, her legacy, and her love. The battle for Blackwood Industries and for Nathaniel Blackwood himself had just begun. Evelyn's world crumbled on what should have been the happiest night of her life, but from the ashes of betrayal, she rose as a warrior. Armed with the devastating truth, she stands with her newfound allies against a ruthless billionaire who holds her husband's life in his hands. The battle lines are drawn, the first shot has been fired, but the war is far from over. Will they succeed in exposing Donovan Croft's criminal empire? Can they rescue Nathaniel from the clutches of a man who will stop at nothing to protect his secrets? And what will be the ultimate cost of justice for the Blackwood family? The story of love, loss, and vengeance is only just getting started. If you are on the edge of your seat and need to know what happens next, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and most importantly, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2.